Andrew, Happy New Year. It's good to see you. I know we're 2 weeks in, but I haven't spoken to you this year.
Yeah.
So the company's not even 9 months since IPO, and I thought before we get into the latest January 2026 news, it would be a good idea to look back at what you've achieved in that not quite 9 months, and maybe your highlights from 2025.
Yeah. So we started we IPO'd on April the 25th of 2025, so 9 months ago or something. We started the work, 12, 13 months ago, depending on, how you look at it, just before Christmas, just after Christmas. So it's been a pretty intense period of time, the 9 months that many people have been shareholders, and for me, the 12 or 13 months, once we actually decided to do this. And loads of things have happened over the last year, like I haven't actually stopped to, think to myself, what have the best bits been so far? Clearly I'm very proud of the company as it's becoming. I think that we've done quite well to build up a Bitcoin balance sheet of 2664 Bitcoin. I think that we've made massive strides forward in terms of building out our company, in terms of, the structure, the governance, which is really important. I think we've made good steps in terms of the strategy. So that's not just the Bitcoin treasury strategy, that's the operating business and the acquisition strategy. So I think we've done well on that. I've met some amazing people. There's been a few sort of downs as well as ups. As is natural with these things, when you've put yourself out there and your company's become, quite high profile. I've said in our weekly updates recently that, like I view that first year or whatever the period of time is as like literally the foundations, and then this is the bit that people will really see, build the skyscraper on top of the foundations. And I think those foundations have been laid very, very well. I'm not unhappy with any part of them. And it's going to allow our company to do what I want to do for our shareholders. So, if last year was a good year, then I think this year, we'll hopefully dwarf it. That's not a projection, obviously. But then at the same time, that's one take on it. The other take on it is, I felt quite bad for the last few months. It's been really hard. And that stems from two things. One of those things is clearly the share price has been, heading down. We got to, approximately a 0.7 MNAV. And, at the same time, I've been very restricted on what I'm allowed to say. So, for me, that for someone that believes in transparency and trying to tell your shareholders everything that you can, it's, that's been quite tough.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for everyone that has believed that we're doing what we've constantly said we're doing, which is trying to build the company in the right way. And I'm hoping that, that's the sort of the blip, as we then, continue to advance from here. Obviously, the only thing that I'm almost certain of is we're going to become one of the biggest companies in the UK if we can continue to execute. But I'm also certain that there will be a lot of volatility along the way, which we've always been very transparent about. But we're working on lots of things that we'll be able to talk about over the coming sort of days, weeks, and months. And I was so pleased to be able to announce, the news earlier this week, because that shows people that we're doing, one of the things that we've said we'll do.
Fantastic. I just want to ask though, sort of, IPO April, May, June, that sort of time. Did you have any idea that it would go that well?
That's a tricky question to answer, because I had no doubt that we would make the company successful over the medium to long term. That was my opinion, and it still is my opinion. If you look back at the early articles about us, I 100% meant, and I can't remember whether it's May or April, but there's an article out there that said we're going to be in the FTSE 100 one day. I believe that if we can keep working hard, we'll get in the FTSE 250 this year. And then obviously as quickly as we can, we'll grow from there, responsibly at the same time. Again, not a projection. So I didn't have any sort of goal. I just knew that I wanted to be better every single day, because that's how I've lived my life. Obviously not always managing to achieve that. And so I haven't really sort of tracked it in the way that some people might. When you're in the thick of it, you're just working all day, every day, trying to advance. And as long as you're advancing, you're not really thinking about anything else. I had a moment the other day where, because I remember when we listed Hargreaves Lansdown on the stock market, which was, I don't know, 20 years ago now. It was a pretty special moment. And when we decided that we would list on Aquis, which has been a good market for us, it's a good growth market. I, at the time, 9, 10, 11 months ago, whenever, I didn't see the LSE as being something that we could be on, we could be part of, because, the Bitcoin treasury model, wasn't as understood as it is today. So, to go from, all being well, an Aquis listing to an LSE listing in 9, 10 months or something, that's pretty cool. So, I don't really think of it like that, if I'm honest. All I want to do is try my very best, and I can't always do it because I can't control the market. But all I really want to do is be better, every single day if I can.
And you mentioned there sort of LSE didn't maybe seem possible 12 months ago. Would you see that as maybe one of yours and SWC's achievements, that you've helped spread the word and kind of educate?
Yeah, and that's positive, right? So I don't talk about lots of the other companies in the UK very often, and that's because I'm so busy doing what I'm doing. I speak to some of the people that run those companies privately. If I see an announcement I think is particularly good, I send them a message saying well done and all that sort of stuff. I'm just interested in the Smarter Web Company. A side sort of benefit for everyone, including us, is that there is an acceptance, a growing acceptance. If I look back at the start, you invested right at the start, so you probably remember that we were forced to describe our treasury strategy as a digital asset treasury policy. I think that was the words. And funnily enough, that became a phrase, DATS, that people were using towards the end of last year quite a lot. But fairly promptly, we were allowed to change that to a Bitcoin treasury strategy policy. If you had been on those early calls with the advisors and you said that I would now be allowed to use phrases such as, Bitcoin yield and, MNAV and these sorts of things in an FCA or being well approved document, I would say that you're having a laugh. So, clearly we've done a good thing. I think, this is a continuous thing, right? Over a period of time, the good things prevail in the world, not always as quickly as we would like. And, Bitcoin and, a company holding their assets in Bitcoin is clearly a good thing, in my opinion. And so the acceptance is way better than it was, a year ago. And I think in a year's time, it'll be way better as well. So, I'd like to think that we've played a small part in that. There's lots of other people that are doing lots of things as well, which is great. And together we're all stronger. So yeah, it's not really my style to try and say that we've sort of been one of the more important companies in the space, but we probably have.
Yeah. So let's move on to now then. 2026. It's been an amazing 2 weeks for the share price with regards going back up. Plenty of news. Can we start with talking about your hiring of Martin Thomas as a new non-executive director? Tell us a bit more about him.
Yeah, so probably the best way of answering the question is just explaining the board composition of a public company and the way that it's meant to work, as far as I'm concerned anyway. So a board of directors consists of executive directors and non-executive directors. Executive directors are people who, in our case, it's their full-time and only job. And in other companies, it's the people that are running the company. So, I view an executive director as, literally that's their job. They do that all day long, and it's as simple as that, which is basically what it should be, but it's not always what it should be. Now, their job is like mine, the CEO, or Albert, our CFO, and then they're supported by the wider team, consultants, employees, advisors, all this sort of stuff. And then you've got the non-executive board, and the non-executive board is typically people that oversee the executive board, and they meet periodically, to ensure that the shareholders are being looked after. Like, obviously, I view that as one of the most important part of my jobs, but the non-executive board hold the executive board to account effectively. So we've got a non-executive board that we've had since we admitted 9 months ago. Sean is the chairman, and then you've got Tyler, and then you've got Randall, who we announced earlier last year, and then now you've got Martin. So what I need from the non-executive board is I need people with various different bits of experience to help me alongside what they're meant to do, which is oversee all the different things that the company's doing. So what I want from that is I want to have people with skills in different areas. So Randall is, he used to be an audit partner, and he's the senior non-executive director for Games Workshop. So audit and accounts related things, all that sort of stuff. Amazing. And then Martin, he's very experienced in capital markets. There's probably not anything that you could know about the legal side of capital markets that he wouldn't be able to talk to you about. And he's also got experience of a very, very, very small company, a bit like the size we were once, growing to like FTSE 250 level, and then working out its next step. In their case, it was moving to the New York Stock Exchange and maintaining a secondary listing in the UK. I'm not saying that that's our plan, but growth, legal growth, capital markets, all that stuff. I think maybe in the future we would look at another non-executive director. Probably the one that I would like is more sort of on the entrepreneurial, that scale side of things, which the other directors have also got. But maybe someone like a version of me 20 years down the line or something. If we can find one of those, that would be good. So the non-executives, in very, very simple terms, they oversee the board, ensure the highest standards of corporate governance, and they're a bit like people that I can pick up the phone whenever I want and say, look, how would you deal with this? What's the best thing to do here? All that sort of stuff. So they're really important, but they're not like the executive board who are working all day long, every single day, on advancing the business. They're the people that are checking that the executive board are advancing the the agreed strategy, and then significant things that you might want to do would go up to the board, and they'll all vote on it basically, and then those things will sort of materialize from there.
Awesome. Now on to the big news. You've announced your intention to uplist to the LSE. Can you, with it not being set in stone, I'm sure there's bits that you can't talk about, but with what you can talk about, are you able to fill us in maybe on the process so far, or the process going forward, what needs to happen before that happens?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously everything related to that has been announced. So if I just talk around that, that's probably the best thing to do. People can refer back to the announcement that we made, to clarify, the factual points. So the way that it works is you decide that you want to list on the London Stock Exchange. We started that process quite a long time ago. People might be surprised to hear that that's taken more than a couple of months, and it's a bit like an Aquis admission process multiplied by 10 or something like that. Not in cost, but in terms of the work that goes into it. It's an incredibly serious, rightly so, process. If you look back at last year, 2025, there weren't that many companies that did that process, because it takes a lot of time and a bit of money. The cost of it, by the way, will be communicated further down the line in the prospectus when that's published. So you decide you want to do it. It takes an amount of time. At some point, you, with the support of your advisors, can decide when you tell the market that. So, a lot of companies would have probably announced that a few months ago, but we didn't want to do that because, we wanted to make sure that we were sufficiently confident of what we were doing before we said that. So that's why we announced it very, very recently. And if you look at that announcement, it was, it was quite black and white, very factual. It didn't have one of my quotes in it, for example. And then what happens after that is you publish a prospectus, and that's it's a document that when it gets published, if that's the right terminology, it's a document that I'm really proud of, that explains everything that we're doing, all the detail that you would expect, really well. I'm really proud of that document. And then obviously you agree a point, which according to the other day is the 3rd of February. So that's the point at which you stop on one, start on the other. It's basically one stops, one starts. It's not like there's an overlap or a gap. Those dates can change, of course, and they'll all be detailed in the prospectus. But that's what was in the announcement. And then that's when you start, your shares start trading. So if you're a shareholder like me and you've got your shares in HL, for example, it's sort of you're indifferent because the shares, well, I believe you're indifferent because it's the same shares, they just trade on a different venue. And that's that. On the actual day of the event, there's they call it an opening ceremony, which basically means that the company and its advisors, and in our case, providing I'm allowed to do it, which I haven't fully checked this one yet, I'm going to do some sort of raffle, so I can ask all of our shareholders to say who would like to come, and then randomly select the spaces that I'm allowed to do, because I thought that was the fairest way of doing it. Because I want our shareholders to be part of that, as much as the team and the advisors and the media and things. And that's, when the shares start trading, and then you just carry on doing what your prospectus says that you do, which is basically very similar to what our admission document said we would do when we listed on Aquis. and what all of our announcements have said we would do, and our 10-year plan, which was very clearly stated at the start. So that's the process. It's pretty full on, and I'm grateful to all of our advisors and all of the team, because they've all worked very, very hard on that. So that's the process.
Okay, excellent. And it feels like we're, approaching the final straight, maybe, if you want to use that analogy.
According to the publicly available information, it would appear that it's imminent.
Fantastic. Speaking of the 10-year plan, are you able to give us a bit of an update on the operating business?
Yeah, so I can't talk about any specific numbers or projections. I think a lot of my time last year was very much focused on, trying to make sure that we had the right composition of the team, and getting that heading in the right direction. I think the operating business, which is sort of largely sits underneath Alex, who many of you will know, you can see him on our website, has been doing exactly what it says it will do. I've got an ambition of, and I've said this before on the interviews when I've done them before, that I was really proud, of the fact that the Smarter Web Company, as a private company, was profitable every single year for 15 years. And clearly, we've got bigger costs now, and I'm keen to get back to that position. It's a tough market out there, the UK economy, which most of our business comes from the UK. But I'm not disappointed with how it's going, but I can't tell you whether it's going better, worse, or the same. What I can tell you is that, in line with our 10-year plan, I'm very confident that it's going in the right direction, and I'm looking forward to be able to announce more information on that in due course. And that's probably all that I should say on that. Although there's one thing that I would perhaps like to say, which is, please could everyone remember that if they do work at a business or they own their own business and they do need a website, please get in touch with us, because it's a genuinely great service. But I won't try and do the sales pitch more so than that.
Excellent. So it would seem over the last sort of 6 months or so, there's been perhaps a rotation of retail shareholders. And you've previously mentioned about investor meetings and things like that. What's the sort of latest that you can share on your thoughts and what's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, so there's lots of different variables here. So if you look at your shareholders, or who you want to be your shareholders, you can broadly split it up into retail and institutions. Institutions can be quite small or very, very big. We've got a great dialogue with both of those groups of people. There are a lot of institutions out there that will not invest in an Aquis stock because they're not allowed to. And that's been a key consideration of where we're going. I've noticed that my phone's got even busier this year. And so I firmly believe that sentiment is coming back to this type of company. I believe that a company that's building its balance sheet on digital capital will go through like waves. The best one that people can study for what the wave might look like, but in my opinion, not the time periods on the wave, is a strategy. So if you look at strategy, there was a year and a half, whatever it was, when it traded at a negative. I believe that all those times are really being squeezed up. So they if you look at their wave, they traded at a positive MNAV and then came back to a negative, and then went up. And then in this current down thing, dependent on where you look for their MNAV, they either just dipped below 1 or stayed above 1. And I think that's because the market trusts them, because they've been around. Obviously, they're bigger, and things like that. So I think that as we look forward, 10, 20 years, whatever, I think that you'll see these waves, and the waves will be partly driven by sentiment and then partly driven by trust, and that sort of stuff. In terms of where we're going in the very, very short term with investors, I've had emails from people that they've bought meaningful amounts. I'm looking forward to starting meetings with investors in the not too distant future, institutional investors, the ones that couldn't invest, that said they would invest, and you never know whether, that's really going to be the case. What we need, I think, is we need sentiment to come back. I think it's pretty clear that sentiment is so far coming back into a company like ours. Bitcoin being our store of capital, we could do with that one heading back up, and in my opinion that's looking pretty good actually. So in terms of the sort of the things that I can't control, I'm pretty happy with that side of things. Until we're admitted, all being well, onto the main market, we can't do any specific placings. I would hope that we'll be back at the good old days in the not too distant future of lots and lots of these things. But obviously, once the publication of the prospectus takes place, the shares in issue is as it is, and we won't be looking to do a supplementary prospectus in that very, very short time window, which would be required should you want to do an additional fundraise using newly issued shares. But there's these decisions that these institutional investors make. They don't happen in always in hours. These are days, weeks, and months, these decisions. So I'm pretty happy with how everything's looking on that side of things, and without wanting to ask again for our shareholders to sort of trust me on it, I think that's what they do need to do. And if I believe that I'm getting everything in the right place, then please believe that I'm trying my best on that one, and I'm pretty optimistic about it, whilst not making any guarantees.
Sure. Where does that leave the ATM between now and potential uplisting?
So on the ATM side of things, I would refer back to our previous announcements, because there's nothing further to those announcements that I would be able to say at this point in time. The most recent announcement was on the 24th of December, when we announced that we had added some more shares to the facility. And we said in that announcement that we will update the market, I think we said every Monday, providing shares have been sold in the preceding week. My instruction to the ATM operator has always been the same, which is, I want to try and get the balance between, sort of getting capital into the company and letting the share price do its thing. And I think that's fair. And I know there's been a bit of stick over that facility with other companies, which I think is grossly unfair. If you look at the two biggest companies that have done the strategy, i.e. Strategy and Metaplanet, you take their ATM proceeds out of the mix and you see how much capital they would have, and it would be significantly less. So I like the facility, providing it's used for the benefit of the shareholders over the medium and long term. But I wouldn't want to make any further comment on that facility at this stage.
And I'm wondering if you saw the What Bitcoin Did episode with Michael Saylor from a couple of days ago, and particularly the bit about Michael saying that they won't be launching prefs in the UK. How's that news landed with you?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, as I always am, and as I always am with everyone. I haven't watched the whole video because I'm so busy at the moment, and it sounds awful, but I've watched the two clips that relate to us, and I'm over the moon with both of them. It's humbling to hear somebody that's been so good for the space talk about a number of other companies in the world, and for the company that you set up and then you listed and then you hopefully uplisted, to be in that same sort of minute or two is pretty humbling. So that's great. And then on the pref side of things, I think he's right to say that. I think that if anyone, including Sailor, wanted to explore a different geographical area, I think everyone can do it, everyone. But it's pretty hard. So you need things like local expertise. One of the great things about our company is Jesse and myself, we work so well together, and we think very, very similar in lots of ways, but different enough so that we can help each other. And I think that different, even the Americans and the UK people, we think very differently in lots of ways. So I think there's a lot of nuances that make it quite difficult for a company that isn't, in a particular region to work in that region. But personally, like, whilst I don't want to go against the good news and what he said, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. The more the merrier in any space, as long as they're doing it well. And it'd probably make our life a little bit easier, actually, which is contrary to what everyone thinks. But yeah, it's, I liked hearing both of those clips, and when I've got some time, I'm looking forward to watching the whole interview.
I know you're a bit pushed for time, but I've got 2 more questions left, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The first is, are there any sort of upcoming events, whether they're community or commercial based, that you can let us know that you'll be seen at, or indeed podcasts or anything that you're hopefully going to be on in the near future?
Yes, and yes. We'll announce the AGM in due course. That'll be at the Concord Museum again. I believe from a legal point of view, it's got to be in March. So the date will be communicated in due course, and it'd be great to have shareholders attend. I also mentioned earlier that on the day of potential admission to the LSE, we're going to invite some shareholders. So there'll be some sort of a raffle around that. I would hope that fairly soon we'll be able to do that. Also on that day, we're thinking of organising some sort of, I don't know, like a drinks evening, so that those that can't come to what might be a small number of tickets for the LSE event, which will be done fairly randomly, everyone will be able to come, and I don't know, within reason, I'll buy everyone a drink. So that will be quite good. There's also other things though that other people organise. Before Christmas, there was AT organised a meetup in Bristol, which was great. I think there's a London-based group of investors that maybe we can sort of coincide with our evening in London, and that's quite good. Henry, who's a great guy, the Bitcoin chef, he's organised another feast. That was amazing. He did 2 last year, and that was really cool. I don't know whether there's still some tickets for that or not, but that's another thing. And there might be 1 or 2 more things that will be communicated in due course as well. So yeah, like the community is fantastic. Like when things are tough, or when you've had just an insanely busy day, and then you flick onto the community and you see how upbeat everyone is, it pushes you to work even harder. And we're so lucky to have that support. And I'm determined that we're going to keep trying to build to reward those people for supporting us and taking the time to get behind the Smarter Web Company.
Speaking of which, final question. What are your primary focuses for this year?
To keep improving, as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So, I wouldn't want to, and probably not allowed, to talk around that in any more detail. The prospectus will clearly outline, what the business does, etc. And my job is to execute on that strategy. Now, obviously, over time, that strategy can evolve, which would go through a proper governance procedure, be communicated with shareholders. Maybe shareholders would have to vote if it was specific things, and all those things. But as far as I'm concerned, right now, we're just going to keep doing everything that we've been trying to do. And if I'm able to do it, speed it up and do it better than we've done previously. I can't make any guarantees that will be possible, of course, but I would be very, very disappointed if I can't have a better year for our shareholders this year than we had last year.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a great start to the year so far, and I'm looking forward to the next 50 weeks to see where we end the year on. And I very much look forward to seeing you at Henry's Meal in April. Thanks again to everyone in the community. You've all been fantastic. Just a quick reminder that you need to get your votes in for the GM that's on the 28th. So if you haven't already, please vote, because that's pretty important. And yeah, I look forward to speaking to you or Jesse or indeed someone else in the future.
Yeah, if I could just say one more thing before I leave you in peace, and that's just to say thank you to in no particular order, all of our advisors, the whole team at the Smarter Web Company. They've worked so hard to get us to this position where we're at right now, and then also most importantly, all of our shareholders, to have the support and the trust of so many different people is what makes the Smarter Web Company what it is today. And we're doing our very, very best to keep executing the strategy, not just me, the whole team and the advisors, around what I think everyone wants. So I just want to say thank you to everyone internally and externally.
Oh, and there's the Digital Treasuries Conference.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of live things next week.
Okay.
There'll be a lot. There's only this one that I'm doing this week with you, James, because you're my favourite, but don't tell everyone else that. But my other favourites will be all spoken to next week, all being well. So I think like what Jesse and I have said is we'll split it between the two of us. So I know that I've got a couple of things in the diary, and he's got some great things planned as well. So we'll do our very best to speak to as many people as we can next week. And Wednesday evening, Wednesday the 21st, obviously, that's Tim's event. And I saw yesterday on X that he had said that I would be part of that event, and I'm looking forward to that. Tim is one of the first people who interviewed me, maybe end of April, part of May. I don't even know how we ended up speaking to each other, if I'm honest about it. But Tim's been great, and we've done a number of other things. And he organised an event in New York in September that was absolutely fantastic. And maybe one day an event like that will come to the UK.
That would be amazing. Well, I look forward to all the content next week. It's going to be a good time. Thanks again, Andrew, and thanks again to everyone.